Unfiltered.
I'm Courtney,
I'm Chloe.
and here we are with our 7th episode.
That's crazy. I know. So excited.
Have we ever done anything 7 times in a row?
No. I'm
It's been a while.
I'm so impressed with us.
Today we're diving into 6 Feet Under, Season 1, Episode 7, Brotherhood. This episode opens with a somber death scene exploring the lasting impacts of military service as Private First Class Victor Kovitch's story unfolds. Meanwhile, Nate faces tough choices when a grieving brother challenges his own beliefs about honoring the dead. Ruth starts her new job at Nikolai's flower shop, discovering unexpected joy and a lot of awkward tension along the way. David grapples with his role at the church and navigates some uncomfortable interactions that leave him questioning his choices. Claire wrestles with her future and the pressures of figuring out her place in the world, while Brenda's relationship with Billy takes center stage, putting Nate in a complicated position. Stick around as we unpack all the chaos, heartfelt moments, and what the fuck twists that makes 6 Feet Under so compelling. Let's get into it.
So, episode 7 of 6 Feet Under opens with a somber death scene featuring Private First Class Victor Kovitch. We're introduced to Victor through an old video log he sent to his parents during his military deployment. Full of youthful energy and hope as he details life on base. Fast forward to the present, we see Victor bedridden, quietly suffering from Gulf War syndrome. His brother, Paul, arrives with a new South Park tape to watch together, only to discover that Victor has passed away, leaving behind a haunting reminder of the lasting impact of war. Gulf War syndrome is a chronic, multi-symptom illness, and it affects many veterans of the Gulf War with symptoms like fatigue, muscle pain, and cognitive issues, often tied to exposure to chemicals and toxins during their service. Victor's story highlights the unseen toils of military service and the struggles faced by those who return home forever changed. This scene is particularly interesting when viewed through the lens of history. This was actually a super interesting fact that I found. So less than 2 months after this episode aired, on July 15th, 2001, 9/11 occurred, leading to the U.S. war in Iraq and a wave of military deployment.
Oh my God.
And at the time of this episode, the idea of a soldier deployed in Iraq was a distant memory of the Gulf War 10 years prior, making the story both eerily prescient and emotionally charged. So shout out to Kufasa on IMDb for posting that interesting tidbit. It's a moment that reflects on sacrifice, the passage of time, and the ways war lingers far beyond the battlefield. This opening scene sets a contemplative tone for the episode, inviting viewers to reflect on loss, memory, and the weight of history.
Just FYI, my newborn baby is here in a swing.
Yes.
It is 10 p.m. our time, and I'm solo parenting all of the children. And so we just decided, what the hell, let's figure this out.
We're going to try our best. Okay. So first scene after the death scene is Nate waking up at Brenda's, and Brenda tells him that he was having nightmares all night and he was grinding his teeth in his sleep. So we know that Nate's going through something. Then we see Nate arguing with David about not having time to study because David had called him to ask him to go pick up a body at the nursing home.
Because he's studying for his
Funeral director's license.
Yes.
And David was kind of a dick to him about it. And he was just like, well, caffeine pills and something worked for me or something, because Nate was like, how am I supposed to study, whatever. So David is not sympathetic, which I can understand because he went through this too. And
I hear you, and I hate when people say that shit.
yeah, he's being a dick. I mean,
Yes.
he is being a dick. But I also we already know that's how David feels about the situation.
Yes. It's just, it's frustrating.
Yeah. Then Brenda tells Nate that he needs to take a break, and they're kind of playfully flirting. They do throw some jabs at each other, though, within this flirtation that we are used to with them. And then Nate spits out, God, I love you. And it was kind of awkward because there was an awkward silence. And then he's like, okay, I said it. Let's just like pretend it never happened. And then he's like, let's go to Two Bunch Palms this weekend, which must be a spa or something, because he says we can both cancel all our plans and we can go get away together and get massages and take mud baths. And Brenda's like, I have clients this weekend. And he's like, I have stuff too, but cancel it, whatever, why? Like, let's just go get away together. He's just I don't know. It was kind of I mean, I was excited for them, but it was also just kind of out of nowhere.
Yeah.
It made me almost a little bit apprehensive toward Nate because it was so just cancel everything and like
It was a jump that got like, yeah, he basically unloaded fire right then and there.
yeah,
It was a lot.
which I did love that he said I love you. I liked that part, but then it was like, why are you being so impulsive?
Yeah, it seemed like he just proposed. Like he was acting as if she just said, he didn't even say I love you back. It was so weird.
Mhm. I think this is like a stage for him of he's just being he's kind of just doesn't know what the hell he's doing and he's just doing impulsive things.
Then we
Yeah.
bump over to the kitchen at the Fisher family house, and Claire and Ruth are in there. And it's funny because I see Ruth trying to do some things, and Claire just says, hovering. And I love the boundaries here because I don't think that that's an easy thing for relationships to have. And it didn't seem like Ruth was put off by it. She just, oh, sorry. And like,
Yeah.
I
think she was trying to figure out what book Claire was reading or something like that.
yeah.
At the table reading a book and then
Well, she had an agenda though, because she did want to say that she was
yeah,
that Hiram was going to come over.
she was looking for an in, I think, kind of. Maybe.
Yes. But I did take note of those boundaries because as a mom and a daughter, I totally believe in those boundaries, but they can't be unspoken. I think they have to be fairly explicit.
Mhm.
And I think Claire is
She's good at setting boundaries.
she is.
Depending on who it is.
It depends on if she wants to keep the boundary.
Yeah.
She's good at setting and keeping.
She's good at setting them with people that she doesn't like.
Yes. And I think that's amazing.
Not that she doesn't like her mom, but you get it.
Exactly, but she has that motherly whatever.
Yeah.
And Ruth was like, in a very fast and matter-of-fact way, tells her that Hiram's coming over.
Yes.
And you can kind of tell that Claire's excited about it.
Yes. It shows the shot was really interesting because you can see Claire's face, but Claire's back is to Ruth and Ruth's standing behind her.
And she looked smitten.
You can see her. She's like, but there was a moment she was like, oh, is this the guy? Like she's connecting in her head that it's who her mom was having an affair with. And Ruth is just like, yes. And then Claire kind of turns around and I was waiting to see. I'm like, oh gosh, is she going to be like a bitch about it or something? Like, I didn't know. But she just smiled and she was just kind of like, ooh, I think she's like, ooh,
this
exciting.
Is gonna be fun. Yes.
Yeah. Which was great. Then we see Father Jack talking to a bunch of church people, like other deacons and stuff. And David was there and they're discussing how they're interviewing new priests. Because I'm sure they said it in there, but I wasn't paying close enough attention and I didn't go back to try to figure out. But whoever was the priest that had interviewed David to be the deacon, he must be out now. And I can't remember if they said why or what. But
I think they were just adding to the board.
Oh, you think they were just adding on?
Yeah, so the guy that they were talking to, I think he must have been like the higher board.
Maybe.
I don't understand the terms and stuff like that. So.
If you can not tell, we don't go to church.
I've been there. Like,
Same.
I know what it's like.
Mm-hmm. I actually went to Catholic school until 4th grade.
You did. I did not.
And I wasn't, I don't even, that was weird. I don't know why my parents, sorry. I don't know why my parents.
It's kind of weird that there was a Catholic school in Hibbing, Minnesota. Don't you think? I mean, I guess I'm not surprised that I don't know, just private school. Now we live down in the metro area and
I really would love to know what I would have, if I would have been any different if I didn't, because those were like formative years for me. And it was very strange. I didn't know at the time, but very interesting. Anyway, so they're talking about interviewing new priests, and the other deacons are accusing David and Father Jack for trying to bring in a progressive priest. These people are kind of like snobby seeming and conservative religious type. And one of them says to David, I didn't get this line, but I put it in here because I didn't understand it. But he's like, your father was against Jack here, Father Jack. And as I said at the time, your father was wrong. And he was talking to David.
Oh, I do remember that. I think it was
maybe his dad was, because I'm pretty sure everybody I don't really know. I can't tell who knows Father Jack is gay besides David and who doesn't. And these people, I feel like they're suspicious of a bunch of different people for being gay.
Yes, but they brought up They did. Was that Father Jack that they brought up?
No, they brought up this other guy that we'll get to that. I put it
Okay.
in here, but it was just interesting. Anyway,
Their gaydar is off the fucking. They think
Yeah.
everybody's gay, but they probably are.
yeah,
They're
but
probably
they
right.
think like straight people are. Yeah, it's interesting. So that was a weird scene, but we're seeing that basically David is being included in this decision as one of the new deacons to hire a new priest or select a new priest for their congregation. So then we see Nate and Brenda having, it was like a really intense sex scene. Like they were just going at
Reverse cowgirl with a twist. I love it. And
Yeah.
she was leaning back, and he was probably kissing her.
And then Billy walked in.
Fuck you, Billy.
And it was really awkward.
He's like, what the fuck, Billy?
Yeah, Brenda was pissed, and then he walks out, but he was being
She's
a
such a
dick.
good actress.
She's so good. They are all really good. And then Brenda lays back and she's like, the mood was ruined. And she goes to Nate, well, your mom walked in on us once, so I guess we're even.
Which is fair. I thought that he was going to have a huge, like, freak out moment on Brenda, but I think she saved it by saying that.
Yeah, you can tell he's getting very irritated by Billy, though.
Mhm.
And then we see Billy showing Brenda his photos, and Brenda's flattering him. Oh, these are amazing, just babying him. And Nate reminds Brenda as he's leaving not to forget to cancel all her appointments for the weekend because they had planned this getaway to this spa. And Billy asks what they're going to do after he leaves, and Brenda lies and says that they're going to get plants at like a greenhouse. And you
Yeah.
can tell Billy looks at her like,
And my note is Billy is a child because, first of all, it's none of your fucking business. And second of all, it's none of your fucking business.
we're clearly seeing how extremely toxic Billy and Brenda's relationship is, and how toxic Billy is for Brenda, for Brenda to have in her life. Then we see Nate walking in on David doing the intake for Victor, and Nate recognizes that his brother, it's his brother, Victor's brother, who's there with them. Nate recognizes him and that he was a star wrestler who went to his high school. He's older than Nate. And the guy is super dry, and he says he's not extremely unpleasant, but he basically is just flat with them and tells them that he hates what they're doing, kind of insinuates how he doesn't like that they make money off of people's deaths. And he says that he wants his brother cremated. Nate suggests using his veteran benefits, and the man says no because he's super angry about his brother being sick from the military. He's so resentful because
Valid.
he's viewing that as the reason why he lost his brother. And we know they were really close because we saw at the beginning how he walked in and he would go see him regularly at the hospital. And he said, fuck the army, let them keep their money. David tells Nate that he has to pick up the body at the VA hospital. And Nate tries to tell him that he's going to be gone. David objects. They kind of get into an argument. Then Ruth interjects that she invited Hiram over for dinner. And David is like, wouldn't a restaurant be better? He's being a little bitch. Nate's excited and asks if he can bring Brenda, which this was a really interesting moment because she never even answered. We're starting to see that Ruth does kind of have some kind of dislike toward Brenda. I think she's holding a grudge over the walking in on them because she never even answered Nate when he asked, and she just went into one of her Ruth freakouts and into like kind of ignoring Nate and defending Hiram. I think she might have also just been fixated on David being rude about it, but she was just like,
I think you might be right, though. I
he
didn't
was
even
a
pick
chef and he is and like walks out and they just look at each other like, okay. But
the word chef always makes me hungry.
interesting, yeah. No, it probably will for me too.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm just like picturing all the food that Hiram
Like
made.
good food.
Yes. Like a good fucking. I don't know why I love salads from a restaurant.
Yeah.
Like, I don't ever want to make them, but I will order a nice, bomb, big-ass salad with all the fixins and all the juices.
I don't usually, but there are a few that I've had that I will
Crunchy-ass
always
lettuce.
get when I go to those restaurants because they're so good.
Mm-hmm. I want lots of ham.
Like, what's the French Meadow has a really good one.
I mean, I'll try it. I'm a sucker for a good salad, but it has to be an unhealthy salad. Like, I want all the dressings and the cheese and all that stuff. And I also noted in this situation, Nate Nate obviously, like you said, was asking David for the days off. You know what? He wasn't even really asking. I don't know. That whole thing kind of is irritating. But David basically gives him pushback, and Nate's like, that's because David said, I've been doing this for so many years, and it's, oh my God, I just put two and two together. What did you say earlier? And I said, I hate that excuse.
Oh, I used caffeine pills and what worked for me.
Yes. That's kind of what we're seeing again here is like the deflection of
I sacrifice so much so you can sacrifice too.
Yeah,
I don't
it's a
feel bad for
boomer
you.
mindset. It is a boomer. That's what is irritating for me. Is
Yeah.
it's so like, I did this. Why can't you? And it's not the same. Everybody's situations are different. And Nate flat out says the difference is you're willing to live your life like that, and I'm not. And I bet you David is genuinely jealous of that.
Yeah, I
Because
think so.
living that unapologetic life
Yeah.
is a quality that a lot of people strive for or think they want or want but don't know that they can have it.
Yeah, and that's for sure the position that David is in. But
So I loved that. I loved Nate for expressing his boundaries and sticking to them.
and then I think too David, that's this whole thing. Like David is super jealous because
His sacrifices.
his whole life has just been, I mean, he's not a really super happy person at this point. None of the Fishers are. None of the Fishers are. They're all pretty unhappy.
No, they're surviving right now.
Yeah.
They're not thriving.
Yes. And but for very different reasons.
Uh-huh.
And for David, it's because well, like a part of it is that he has just been trying to be what everybody, and that's what Nathaniel said earlier in the season too, that he cares so much about other people, he doesn't ever take the time to care for himself. And that's what his whole life has been. He's just been doing what he thinks other people want him to do, which has caused him to deny himself his
Pleasure.
whole identity
Mhm.
and everything that he's ever wanted, which is super sad. But also, there is merit to his sacrifice and hard work.
He's not being validated enough either. So in
Yeah.
David's defense, a lot of people that do this and make those sacrifices, they also do expect validation. And whether he explicitly says that he needs that, you can tell that that's something that's been missing from all of this.
Yeah, it's kind of like he's been seeking validation his whole life, and people just kind of, nobody really knew that. I mean, I don't think he probably ever made it clear that he was not wanting to be doing these things that he was doing, but because he probably didn't even realize it himself. But then in turn, nobody is really.
I'd be willing to bet that this is a middle child syndrome.
No one's reacting to anything that he's done.
They will when he says he's gay.
Well, yeah.
We haven't gotten there yet. Well, I
With
suppose
Nate, we
sort of.
have.
Yeah.
Then we see Claire in math class reading this book again. It's not the Charlotte Light and Dark book. It's another book. She says the name of the person later on, which I was going to look up what it was, but I forgot. So I don't know. We'll have to do it. This teacher is a lot. She's
wearing a wig for sure.
Yeah. And then she calls Claire out for not paying attention, and Claire kind of tells her to fuck off. She goes, "This isn't useful to me. You think the whole world runs on logic? Come on, open your eyes." And then she's asked to stay after class, and then we have this like fake out scene of Claire pretending to explode the teacher's head with telekinesis, and then she starts laughing, but she really does laugh, and all the other kids look at her like she's crazy, which was kind of funny. She's a little troubled.
Yeah, they're probably like, what the fuck? I also noted here that I swear to God, if I ever hear the word binomial again in my life, it'll be too soon. It was very triggering.
Really? Why? Did they say binomial?
She said binomial. And yes, I can't even remember what the fuck it was. I was in honors math class. I was the dumbest kid in the entire class.
But you were good at math. Compared to me, I was in the what did they call them? The applied classes.
Yes. That was so nice of them to come up with that name.
I struggled in math. I have always struggled so much in math. I don't know what it is. I don't know why it is.
It's a language. I truly don't know how I made it so far. Like I said, I was the dumbest one in my honors classes. And I remember
we did do, like English classes together. Though.
Yep. We did honors English together too. Wow, we were smart.
I was always English art smart, not science or math. Science or math were not easy for me at all.
I don't think I was actually that good at any of it, but that's okay. Binomial, fuck that word.
So then we see Nikolai on the phone at his flower shop arguing with a customer. He goes, we don't have a website, which was funny because can't remember what the conversation was, but they were wanting to see his work. He's like, you have to come here. And then Ruth enters his shop, and Nikolai's pissed, and he hangs up the phone, and then he turns and sees Ruth, and he goes, the day just gets brighter. And Ruth goes, hush. And she's returning the vases, and she inquires about the sign in the window looking for help. And she says she's interested, and Nikolai wants to take her out to lunch to talk about it. And she's like, I'm not going to lunch with you. I just want a job. And they kind of go back and forth. They're arguing, but also there's an underlying tone of sexual tension. And then Robbie, who is the gay employee of Nikolai, comes up and just hands Ruth the apron to get started and looks at Nikolai like, we need help. Just let her start.
And then I had also pointed out Ruth and Nikolai. I love how blunt and forward she is. It's really impressive, honestly. And this episode should have been called Boundaries instead of Brotherhood. I thought about that because think about all of the other themes.
Yeah.
So now that I said that, think about the themes of boundaries between Claire saying hovering.
Yeah.
And then Nate saying, you wanted to live your life like that. I don't want to live my life like that.
Yeah. That's a good argument. Then we see David interviewing this priest. Apparently this priest is interviewing with all the deacons one-on-one. And the priest is very progressive and says that he's going to push for change. And David kind of argues with him. And the priest says that he knows that David is the swing vote. And he says, religion is politics, David. And he starts talking about Jesus or whatever. And we find out that he's not gay. So this man who's interviewing for the priestship is not gay because he says he was in the Peace Corps and he lost his wife when they were there. And David, I think, was surprised by that.
Which still doesn't mean that he's not gay.
Well, that's true. That is very true. But I think...
Just throwing that in there.
Yeah.
You're probably right. I just had to be that
I think he is... No, I did think about that too. I think that's another like sign of the times. I don't think he actually was, but we would question that today, you know, but it wasn't really.
I also have my thoughts on this man. So continue yours.
So David was surprised when he said he had a wife because I think David was speculating that this man might also be gay because he was so progressive. And the guy starts talking about how he does care so much about minorities, like gay people, poor people, etc. And David asks him, were you this forthcoming with the other deacons? And he said,
great question, by the way.
Yeah, it was. And that kind of starts leading us to what your point is here. But David asks why this man is being so honest with him. And he says, because I can tell that right and wrong actually matter to you. And I said, I wonder if we can trust this guy because he's clearly just kind of plain politics here.
I love that we both kind of came to that conclusion because I'm like, this guy's really good at reading people. He says something about a gay guy, then a black guy. Like he's trying to be a chameleon. And I work in sales to an extent, and I have definitely worked in sales in the past, and it just seemed really like salesy to me, and I don't like that. I don't like being obviously sold something. Yes. And it just turns me off. It's a negative kind of weird. So yeah, I don't know if we can trust him. I don't know.
Well, it ends up not really mattering, but yeah, it was an interesting conclusion that we both came
I think
to.
you should be on the Fuck, Marry, Kill.
Okay.
Or Date, Mate, Cremate.
Yes. So then we see Nate bringing the body down to the prep room and kind of starts bickering with Rico, who's down there working on a body. And Rico makes this comment, it's never going to be Fisher and Sons and Diaz. I know that. So that's the first time that Rico drops that he wants to be a partner in the business, which ends up turning in a small spoiler, but it turns into a continuing theme for a few seasons. And Nate and Rico end up discovering in this paperwork that the soldier's wishes were to be buried at the National Cemetery. So we know now that he was actually super proud to be a part of the military. And Rico gets really excited when he finds out that he gets to work on this man's body because Rico is against cremation. He thinks
he wants to make them beautiful.
Yes, I was just going to say he cares about preserving the beauty and the not necessarily conventional beauty, but just the beauty of the human body remaining
It's an
intact.
art for him.
It is
like
an
that's
art for
his
him.
Artistic abilities.
Yes. And he's excited. He gets to use his skills.
I love that they throw that in there too because it is so interesting to see somebody as a hairdresser who does work on beauty in the beauty industry to see it from a perspective working on a dead body.
Yeah, Rico is very unique
Yeah, his
in that
character
way.
is.
It's super interesting. Then we see Claire at school talking to Gary, the counselor, again, and we find out that she's reading Castaneda.
That's the book.
That's the book. Quick Google. What is Carlos Castaneda was an American anthropologist and writer. Published a series of books that describe a training in shamanism that he received under the tutelage of a Yaqui man of knowledge named Juan Matus. I have no idea what any of that means, but she's reading Castaneda. They start arguing about college, and that's where your quote comes in, because that he's like, don't quote Castaneda to me. And she's like, well, then stop quoting Bob Dylan to me.
And I just threw it in there because we're from Bob Dylan.
Shout out Bob Dylan.
And his new movie.
Yeah. What's it called?
I forgot.
Same. I know what it is. I just am not able to think of it right now because I'm trying to think of it. So then they're arguing kind of about Claire's future, and Gary's trying to convince her that she should go to college. And he goes, okay, so what do you want then? And she says, I just want something to matter, which is so Claire, but also so deep and real. And Gary asks her if she's heard of the Sierra Crossroads program, and he recommends it to her to get her out of her head. He says, it's hard but exhilarating. I could pull some strings and see if I can get you in. And Claire asks him, why do you care what happens to me? And he says, because I like you and I want to see good things happen for you, and I know that they can.
Which I also like. I hope it wasn't perverse. I feel like I would maybe be okay with it. But I also know that I was thinking about that, and I'm like,
if you were Claire, you would be okay with it?
Yes.
Okay, but not okay with it for Claire.
I think no on his part.
Yeah.
But yes on Claire's part.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Only because she's allowed to have this. I don't know.
Yeah,
anyway.
no, that's valid.
I was thinking about our guidance counselors in our school.
Mr. Hintz.
Yep. And Mrs. Simonowitz.
Yep.
Bless her soul, rest in peace.
I would have never remembered her name.
I loved her. She literally saved me. I think our guidance counselors actually fucking cared.
And Mr. Fleming.
He wasn't a guidance counselor, but he's our best buddy.
We pretended like he was.
We treated him like he was.
Shout out.
That poor man knows way too much. He actually sold me this house.
Crazy.
Yeah.
So Nate is talking to the guy at the VA hospital who was kind of like a nurse or something. And they were talking about Victor's wishes. And this man says that he had told Victor's brother and found the forms in the trash later. So he had informed Victor's brother about Victor's real wishes to have a military funeral and be buried and whatever. But then later on, he found the forms that Victor had filled out in the trash. So Paul, Victor's brother, had thrown them out because he didn't care. Remember, he hates the military. He basically tells Nate about this dynamic between Paul and Victor. And he says Victor wanted to believe that what he did in the Gulf meant something, that his life was not a waste, which is so valid and should be honored 100%.
Yes.
So
but I also feel
I also understand Paul's hurt. Does not give him the right to make decisions for him.
Not like this, a dying wish.
Yeah. But this was also a separate but connected, interesting piece for Nate. He's left with this decision to either put the effort in to fight for Victor's wishes, which he knows is the right thing to do, or he could take the easy way out and just pretend like he never really had that conversation with the guy and not put the effort in to being confrontational, which Nate is not used to and does not like to do with Paul. So he's left here trying, we don't know what he's going to decide to do yet.
Okay, and also let's just throw in there that Nate is also very busy. Mm-hmm. So to have to put this extra effort
and he's in love and wants to spend time with Brenda, and that's also valid.
He wants to spend time with his partner for the weekend. He wants to study for this test. There's a lot going on in his life right now.
So he would have had a lot of reasons
to not,
or excuses, things to use as an excuse to choose to not do the right thing in this situation.
So this was a really big,
we don't know what he did. but we will find out in this episode.
Yes. I mean, we do know what he did, but we won't tell you.
Yes. So David freaks out on Rico when he sees him embalming Victor and makes him stop.
I love that scene because he's just like sitting here watching fucking shit, like the embalming fluid.
Yes.
Getting all ready.
Yeah, Rico just loves. It's so funny. I actually had a student who reminds me so much of Rico, and I feel like it's so interesting when you can identify those very odd, peculiar, but significant similarities and mannerisms
And they pull out
yeah,
into yeah.
it's so weird, but I can totally see my past student being someone like this.
I feel like I know a Federico
looks
too.
like him. Yeah. Interesting. I
like kind of goofy.
Yeah. And spacey, but Rico's not really spacey, but just
I think Rico is
special.
on the spectrum.
Yeah, almost a little spectrum. Yeah. There's something.
Okay, and then I also wanted to point out here when David walks in on Federico, the words that came out of David's mouth made me want to punch him square in the face. He says, "How many times do I have to tell you? When Nate gives you instructions, you check with me first." I'm so sorry, but that's not how you run a business with a partnership.
Yeah. I don't think David has come to accept that that's his situation yet.
Okay, well, we're going to call him out.
Yeah. I totally not saying that's an excuse, but.
And you know why that was triggering for me?
Why?
Because I've probably said the same fucking thing.
Like to who?
Somebody I was in charge of that I might have also shared being in charge of with somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Don't know. It has happened.
That's hilarious. And I can totally see you.
Me too. And it's like, oh my God, it just makes me so angry.
So why do you feel like that triggered? You don't like that you were like that? Or why do you think that's triggering?
I think it triggered me because he's how old? And yeah, I think I just hated that version of me.
Yeah. And which would have been a long time ago for you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But
this would have been
like
at least 5-10 years ago. 10 for sure.
Going through this similar, I don't know, experience or character arc or development that you did, but it's so much later in life for him. So it feels ickier or like triggering for you. Like, how are you just now figuring this out?
Because it didn't bother me when I first watched it. The very first time, like 10 years ago.
Okay, interesting. Huh. Yeah. I mean, I would never.
I probably was like, yeah, what the fuck are you doing, Federico?
Yeah.
Back then.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just interesting to watch these shows and then notice
And David is not. I'm sure that we've kind of alluded to this before, and if you're watching this, you obviously know this yourself, but David is not extremely tactful. Like there would have been nicer
He's got resting
ways.
Bitch face.
He's just a kind of a bitch.
Mm-hmm.
Like he acts like a little bitch, and there are a lot of times where he is pretty unlikable. Ultimately and overall, I do love him so much and understand why everyone has reasons why they are the way they are, and that's a part of why the show is so amazing. So
now we're at dinner time, right?
So Brenda, we're at dinner time. Yes, at the Fisher's house. Remember, Ruth had shared with everyone that she was inviting Hiram over, and Brenda walks into the kitchen for dinner, and Ruth and Hiram are cooking together, and Brenda has a bottle of wine, and she tries to hand the bottle of wine over to Ruth, and she holds it out to Ruth and Hiram, and Ruth kind of looks at her, and she greets her, she's like, "Oh, hi," but like doesn't offer to take the wine and just kind of snubs her, which was interesting. So Hiram ends up taking the wine. And then Claire walks in, so that part was interesting because it's added on to earlier when Nate had asked if he could invite Brenda and Ruth never really answered. And then now she's not taking the wine from her. So
I didn't put those that
it was really interesting, and it was almost like, I don't know, but yeah, I think there's something. And I do also have more vivid memories than you would have if you haven't watched in 10 years of what ends up happening later on in the series that I think I'm probably connecting to. That is like helping me pick up those things.
That makes sense.
Yeah. But Claire walks in then, and she kind of walks in on Claire and Hiram canoodling a little bit, like canoodling again. It's a little awkward. They're not doing anything overt. They're just kind of touchy-feely cooking together. But then we see a quick scene of Claire imagining them banging on the countertop. But that was just an imaginary moment. And then at the dinner table, David imagines Ruth giving him a hand job under the table, and she's like, "I can't get enough of his cock," but that was just in David's imagination. And Claire at the dinner table asks Ruth for money for this Crossroads program that Gary had mentioned to her, and Nate comes in late, and introduces himself to Hiram. He's very friendly. And Nate says that Claire should go to the Crossroads program. And he says that he went when he was 17. And Ruth doesn't remember. And Nate says it's because he lied because he knew that Ruth and Nathaniel would never let him go. So he said he was doing some other nerdy thing, which was kind of funny.
And totally on par.
And also kind of seals the deal for Claire because Ruth doesn't really have a reason to
not let her go.
Yeah. And Nate is saying how great it was.
Yeah.
And stuff. So
impactful.
I think that's probably because you could tell Ruth made a comment, we'll talk about it. But I another mini spoiler, but I do know that Claire does end up going on this thing. So Ruth does end up letting her. And I think it's probably because Nate said that he went and it was a good experience.
Mm-hmm.
Then Ruth announces at the dinner table also that she got a job at the flower shop, at Nikolai's flower shop. And Hiram looks a little bit perturbed. He's like, you didn't tell me about this.
Which I thought was weird too. Like, what the fuck? Why is everybody trying to get into the business of...
I'm trying to connect how does Hiram even know who Nikolai is?
I think he's just confused that she got a job.
Yeah, that's probably it. Because I don't think he would have a reason. But she also does say it like, Nikolai's flower shop, like everyone knows who Nikolai is. I don't know. It was just interesting. So Hiram was a little bit on edge when she said that.
Yeah, and that kind of just felt awkward to me. And then I, first of all, want to point out Ruth's hair in this episode.
She looks so pretty.
In this scene, yes. It's down, it's done. She looks very flirty.
Yeah.
And
loose.
Yeah. So... I loved that. And then Brenda's one-liner to David about Nate.
Because Nate wasn't there right away.
Yeah, Brenda showed up. I thought that was interesting, too. She obviously, like you said, showed up with the wine earlier, and Nate wasn't there yet. Where was he?
He said he got caught in traffic. But I think he was doing had to do with this veteran guy.
I think you're right. And David's like, oh, sorry about that. And I loved this one-liner. Brenda goes, that's okay. I can exist without him.
I'm so glad you caught that because when I read your notes, I didn't even catch when she said that, but I love that so much too.
It was like, I need to write that down. Thank God I did.
Because David said, he's like, I wish I could tell you where Nate was or something. And then she must have said, it's okay. I can exist without him. Like,
she's so comfortable in her skin.
And that's, I mean, good on her for calling that out because it's like, yeah, very true.
Mm-hmm.
I am my own person. I don't need him attached to me in order to be relevant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I loved it.
But yeah,
and all the sexual innuendos. I was like, I mean, dying with the cock and
the vision or the imagination.
Yes, I was
Claire and David.
A puddle.
That was funny. It was funny. So then David and Nate are washing the dishes kind of together after dinner, and David tells him about Victor. And they go back and forth, and Nate explains that Victor is actually eligible for more benefits than they had thought. And then they get interrupted because Brenda comes in and says she's leaving. So Nate walks her down to the door, and she asks him to stay over. And he's like, no, I can't. I got to do this tomorrow, whatever. And immediately after, he's like, give me 5 minutes. I'll follow you. So he's trying to be responsible, but cannot handle. He just reverts
He's
back.
So horny.
Horny and just really struggles with that sense of responsibility, I feel, which is you get into that kind of argument again, or not argument, but debate of what should one do? Because there are a lot of times where you do have to make sacrifices in life and be responsible
and be playful at the same time
and give up on things. But then there are also times where you have to care for yourself and do what you want to do.
Yes.
And I don't know.
And that can change throughout the day.
Nate's scales aren't super balanced. He's super on the always do what you want to do and not a lot of responsibility.
Yes,
we
had a friend like that.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. But David's scale is balanced in the other way. And that's why they butt heads so much. But
I think I feel like, where do you feel like you lie?
I think most of my life, I was more, and we talked about this before too, but I was more David. I was more just super anxious and worried about all the responsibilities. I don't know if you've ever needed to take, or if anyone who's ever going to listen to this has ever taken or heard of the Clifton Strengths Finder.
Yeah, I have. I don't remember what mine are.
I know I did it in college, and then for my job I have right now, they also recently had us do it. So that was like a 10-year difference between the 2 times I took it. And I had a couple similar ones, but also a couple different ones. But one that stayed on there for me was responsibility. And it just basically means, I mean, every strength is going to also have downsides to it, just like it has plus sides. So I think with responsibility, it's like the plus side is like you're always going to follow through. If you say you're going to do something, you're going to do it. You're not going to make excuses, but that can be also to your detriment. So I feel like for me, I was,
especially if you take on more than you.
And it was almost just like I don't know, I didn't even ever realize that there was another option, and that it was okay and healthy and actually really necessary to put yourself first and care for yourself and make sure that you had time for you and whatever. But I 100% feel like I was more, my scale looks more like David, where I don't know. What do you think? The opposite, probably.
Yeah, I think growing up, I absolutely was Nate, for sure.
Yeah.
And now I can see myself more in the middle. But I'm the type of person that I will follow through on my plans, but I'm also hoping that you don't.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I am one text message away of, hey, I can't make it tonight because I'm so sorry. And I'm like, you don't have to give me an excuse. It was fine. I was hoping you'd cancel.
Yeah. But think of another scenario, like if you're in a job where you're not the boss, someone else is the boss, and you have, or even when we were in high school or college or any type of school and you had an assignment. So something that's being put on you, not like a fun social plan, but something where like, feel like Nate, if you're looking at it, comparing Nate and David, Nate would be more apt a lot of the time to half-ass things and just kind of not really care, which, I mean, high school is actually a really good example of that.
Yeah, I probably would have been
people
still on Nate.
And I was always,
unfortunate.
So the reason that I was not on Nate's side and more on David's spectrum here, it was like out of fear. I feel when I'm sitting and thinking back, it was like, and I don't even know.
Get the guilt.
Yeah, very, very guilty feeling.
But I would never call into sick work.
Yeah, you wouldn't. I
would
never
call
did
into
either.
work sick.
I would never either.
Yeah, because I didn't like that guilt. I would get that guilt feeling from calling in sick.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about. But anyway, so.
And then we have this beautiful conversation between Ruth and Hiram.
It's great. So Nate said he's like, okay, I'll follow you. And then Hiram and Ruth are cuddling on the couch and they're talking about how they think dinner went. And Ruth lays in his lap and it was so sweet. And she goes, you know what occurred to me tonight that's really strange? I wish you had known my husband. I think the two of you would have liked each other. And again, Hiram, I don't know, like, I love Hiram so much. I don't know how I slept on him the first time I watched this through, because he was just didn't even really register in my brain as a strong character the first time I watched this. But watching this through this time, I'm just like, good Lord, this man has such a loving soul and heart. But she says that to him, and a lot of men might be like put off by that or like weirded out, but he just strokes her hair and he's like, oh, Ruth.
Like, and it is a beautiful realization for Ruth. And then to share that with Hiram, I love that she felt safe enough to share it. I wonder if because I kind of slept on him too in the first time I watched it. And I think that you can't really understand Hiram without a little bit of wisdom in your own life. Because I think Hiram, he's a hairdresser, dude. He has heard everything. He is wise beyond his years. And I think being a hairdresser also has shown me that, because I see I'm a fucking therapist.
Yeah.
And so is Hiram. So he can see all of these different people. And I think that we're just more accepting and understanding for what people are going through.
That is a good point. I never drew that correlation to him being a hairdresser, to him being so good at listening to sometimes absurd things, because Ruth can sometimes come off as a little unhinged. And not saying that this was unhinged of her to say, but it was a little bold.
It was very bold and could have gone south very quickly.
Yeah, but like you said, she clearly was so comfortable with him and felt safe with him. And I love that. I love them so much. I love Hiram. So then we see Brenda and Nate entering Brenda's home the same evening.
I can't even think about Billy. I get so upset.
I know, he's very triggering. So they have this gift basket there, and it's from Billy. And It says in the card, sorry about this morning when he walked in on them having sex. Have fun
That's
at
what he
Cactus
wrote in the
World.
card.
Yeah. I didn't write when I walked in on you, but he said,
but he said,
sorry about this morning. And then have fun at Cactus World, which was not actually where they were going, but where Brenda had told him they were going. And inside the basket are condoms, oysters, champagne, edible underpants, and a huge floppy dildo. Nate's like weirded out.
Yeah.
And Brenda's like, oh, no, it just means he likes you. Trust me, it's better this way. If he didn't like you, he'd be way worse. And Nate asks...
I would have taken the way worse.
Nate asks her about the tattoos. The
Which I didn't like that
Nathaniel
either.
and Isabel tattoos. You didn't like what?
I didn't like that he asked.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I felt like he could have waited.
It maybe wasn't the best timing.
It wasn't, because it seemed like it was out of an insecurity
Yeah,
rather than an
and it
actual...
was.
Yes, that's why I didn't like it.
Right. I do understand the curiosity, though, but I do agree that wasn't very well played by him. And he asks about the Nathaniel and Isabel tattoos, and she's like, oh, we're in Vegas. We were very drunk. But then she kind of cuts herself off when she pulls the dildo out of the basket and kind of changes the subject by talking about the dildo. And she asks Nate not to judge Billy because Nate doesn't know what Billy's been through. And Nate is just like, all right. And he hugs her and he kisses her, which was so props to him for, I mean, that's kind of a lot to just be plowing through and accepting.
Yes, it is. And even now I'm sitting here thinking about it, that's tough, because it's one thing to not judge somebody for maybe not really knowing them, but judging them for how they're acting in front of you is totally different. Like, I don't know. The encounters that he has had with Billy thus far aren't great.
Yeah.
They don't set a really good foundation for a good relationship between Nate and Billy.
So basically, Nate has every right to be setting his own boundary with Billy.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It's
but
not
he's
like
not
he's
choosing
hearing about Billy and hearing, oh, Billy said this, and like he actually had
actual uncomfortable confrontation.
It is okay to be uncomfortable with somebody, even if they are mentally unstable.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean that you're downing
you have to
on
baby
them.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Or
you don't have to baby them, and you don't have to
compromise your own boundaries for them.
Correct. Oh my God, yes. I was frustrated. Oh yeah, so I wrote, as I'm typing this, Billy is frustrating me with this gift basket right now. Great. Brenda just asked me not to judge him, and here I am judging him like fucking Judge Judy.
Yeah.
As I was writing that, I forgot that she said that.
It's valid, though. I mean, I think nobody can watch this without being a little bit sus of Billy at this point.
Okay, so this was funny. Is he back at his house? Where the fuck does David live?
David lives in their little garage apartment.
That's right. Okay. So David's back at his home,
which is like at the Fisher house, but garage apartment.
And I was writing, oh, goody, David's going to masturbate to some army porn while talking to the church people that just called. And this dude talking to David about Clark possibly being gay and how bad that would look for the church, which then probably kills the mood for his self-pleasure. So then he doesn't get to masturbate, and I felt really bad.
Yeah. So we just basically see David getting ready. I mean, he sits down in his comfy chair, and he has his towel, and he flips the TV on, and we see, like, obvious gay porno happening.
In the army.
Yeah, it was army guys, like army dudes. And I wrote down, it's kind of weird to think that he might have been getting like turned on from the dead soldier. And then
he was
like
hot too.
He was a nice looking young man. So I wondered that, and I'm like, that's kind of morbid, but I mean, whatever. That's probably real.
One thing, it is. I'm really big on kinks. This is not a kink of mine. However, it's different to have that fantasy than to act on it. So that's a good boundary.
Well, right. And I wasn't trying to insinuate that he wanted to get into necrophilia or anything, but
or that he was just attracted to the guy.
Yeah, just that. And he's so...
It was odd to
like how did that expressed. Like he's so pushed down in his identity that he's like not getting any affection. So he probably is getting turned on by the most non-turn-onable things, like a dead body of a hot guy, you know what I mean? But anyway, just kind of a weird noticing. And then the phone rings right as he sits down getting ready to masturbate, like Courtney was saying, and it's the guy from the church.
Fuck answers their phone when they're about to masturbate.
I know,
but not be stirred.
It might have been, maybe he was like, oh, what if it's a business thing? Needed to take a call to get money for the business.
Leave a
or
message.
Body. Yeah, valid. But he answers, which just shows, again, David putting others before himself. And it's
Not me.
one of the other deacons from the church.
I will text you back, call you back in 5 minutes.
Courtney always has her notifications off. On every time I text her, it's like she.
Do you want to send it to her silently or loudly?
What does it do when I say yes? I did that one time a couple weeks ago when you were sleeping. Does it even notify you? Or
I'm sure it vibrates.
Oh, okay.
Because normally it just wouldn't vibrate.
Okay. So this guy from the church, he's another deacon, and he calls David to ask if he's available the next morning to go and vote on whether they think this priest that they've been interviewing should be voted in to be their new priest. And he goes, David, can I ask you something? Do you think Father Clark, which is the guy they've been interviewing, is gay? And David has a moment of pause
as he's looking at his
gay porn on the TV. And he was like, I don't think so. He mentioned that he had a deceased wife. And this guy goes, I just don't want him to push that agenda, the whole marriage thing. And he talks about how he had a cousin in another church whose congregation, they lost so much of their congregation because they voted in this super progressive priest who was very divisive, essentially. So David's getting this information, kind of being influenced by him. So David is also, just like Nate, being presented with a choice. What are you going to choose, the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do? And then we see for David, what the right thing to do for him would be to advocate for this progressive priest, because he's saying he wants to make a change in this super antiquated conservative church community, which is needed and necessary.
And could have also been an ally for David when he does come out.
And the other choice is to cater to these other people who are trying to get him to be a certain version of himself that they want him to be. And remember, Nate's choice was, are you going to do the right thing for Victor, or are you going to just choose yourself again? So that's an interesting thing. I just kind of realized right now they're both being faced with these big choices in this episode. And then Nate tells David that he figured out what to do with Victor. And David's arguing with him and asks, why do you even care? Because Nate has been spending all of his time basically chasing these people around trying to figure out what Victor's eligible for with his military benefits and etc. And Nate says that he cares about what Victor wanted and says, I know he didn't hate the army. He was proud of it.
It's so sweet. And then by the grace of God, Nate turns on the TV to David's porn by accident. I freaking died. Thought it was amazing and hilariously funny. I don't know if that's ever happened to me.
Well, we probably never used VHS tape.
True.
In our television.
That's very true. But I thought it was so cool of Nate. He didn't act grossed out or anything.
No, he's very validating.
Yes. And he's like, what? I watched porn too.
Yeah, he's like, come on, it's funny. Like, it's fine. I watched porn.
It was funny, but to David, it was so taboo and secret.
I loved how Nate allowed him to just kind of brush it off, though. He didn't. It was just like, come on, it's nothing. And David was just like, and walks away.
Yeah, it was great.
Super funny. And then we see Claire in the library at school, and she's studying for the SAT or something. And there's a group of girls who are kind of laughing at her and sitting at the table. Yeah, they were the same girls that we saw from the math class that were staring at her. And they're sitting at this table by her and kind of looking at her. So Claire walks up to them and she's like, which I thought was kind of bold and sweet of her to just be like, oh, yeah, go talk to whoever. And because I was never like that.
Different.
Yeah. And she's like, are you taking the SAT this afternoon too? And they're like, yeah. And they're just kind of being standoffish, a little bitchy to her. And then Claire kind of laughs and we switch again to her imagination. And she's going around and imagining how each one of these girls dies. And one of them is super happy and she's rich and has a family. Another one becomes a miserable executive businesswoman. Another is super successful with her new company, but then she dies of ovarian cancer before she's 30. And it shows them kind of made up to look like what they would look like when they're older. And we see the happy one with the family, just looks plumped up, cute mom with her baby, and Parker McKenna, who we will learn more about later, but she was the business executive lady. She's wearing this blazer with her hair up, and she looks all done up like that. And then this woman, the girl who grows up to die of ovarian cancer before she turns 30, looks like she has cancer and is just very scary and morbid. And it was a really, I mean, I loved that scene. It was super creative, but also it was just one of those 6 feet under jabs at the stomach, like, well, yeah, remember, you're going to die and you don't know when.
The ovarian cancer killed me. Do you remember when I used to have, I have OCD, and one of the things about it is my thoughts. They're very
like hypochondria.
Yes, but it's an obsession. Do you remember when I used to think I was always having an aneurysm?
No, actually, not really.
I think Christina would remember, but something happened when I was in 7th grade. Somebody I know died of an aneurysm, and so I would lit my uncle.
Oh. Sorry.
And so I know, it was super sad. I didn't mean to say it like that. But it was just like at that age, I internalized so many things.
Yeah.
And my OCD it had actually evolved from something before that, which was saying my prayers, which I'm not even religious, but that's a whole thing. My therapist knows all of this. Anyways, so that has evolved into other things throughout my lifetime, the compulsion and the obsessiveness that I get with these weird, intrusive thoughts. Currently, my current OCD is ovarian cancer.
Really?
Yes. And it freaks me the fuck out. And so I put a note in here to just put this out there for awareness, because it is one of those cancers that by the time it's a silent killer, by the time you find out that you have it, it's too far gone. Like, it's so, yes, I will like rabbit hole that.
I
stuff.
mean, you know what you have to do to like get tested for that? Like, get fucking
insane.
probed.
Yes.
And scraped.
So my other piece
sucks.
of, yeah, I know. And one of the other things that I was going to plug in here too, if you're done having children and maybe you have your tubes tied, maybe you're on birth control, but if you're like done, my OB and my midwife both were telling me about this procedure where they actually do a laparoscopic snip and a snip, and they just pull out the fallopian tube. So they keep
I'm gonna pass out.
It's really, I'm so sorry.
Are you okay?
It's very important.
I passed out at the eye doctor. Continue.
Okay.
Let me know when you're done.
So what it does is it decreases the risk of ovarian cancer by 60%. So it's incredibly high. And it doesn't fuck up your hormones. So you don't have to go on any hormone replacements as you would if you were to get your ovaries removed, and you know what I mean? So everything kind of just stays normal, but it doesn't pass through. It's just very permanent.
When do you think you would do that?
Well, apparently I'm done having children, but I don't feel that I'm going to do it at 35. So a couple more years.
Good call. What do you mean apparently, according to Rob?
Yeah. Yeah, Rob says we're done.
Well, 4 is a fucking lot.
4 is a lot. I'm dying. Hopefully.
But you're still really young.
Yes, but 30? I'm older than that.
But you're not dead.
Thank God.
So Claire is talking then to these imaginary future versions of these women. And when this woman tells her that she died of ovarian cancer, she's like, oh, that sucks.
Yeah.
And she's like, yeah, it does. And then they're all laughing together in Claire's imagination. But then when Claire comes back to reality,
she's laughing again?
She's laughing again by herself. And they're all just staring at her. And then she kind of walks away. She's like, oh, okay, well, good luck. And walks away. And then they look at each other and one of them says, what a freak, which I don't condone that meanness, but I understand why they're confused.
Yeah.
And then David enters Father Jack's office at the church, and Father Jack is anxiously awaiting their decision on whether they're going to confirm, what was his name, Clark or something?
Yes, Clark.
For the priesthood. And David sits down and ends up telling him that they voted against Father Clark, and they're concerned that he might end up being divisive. And Father Jack is kind of, I mean, you can really tell he's gay here just by mannerisms and the way his, I don't know, you can just
even what
tell.
he says, I think was
yes, and
fairly...
by what he ends up saying. But I feel like they are intentionally making it more clear that he is gay. And he kind of bitches at David, and he pulls out a bottle of scotch, which I thought priests weren't allowed to drink. And I feel like they're not, because he offers it to David, and David was like, no, thank you. And what seemed sketched out by it, but I support him. I think he should have a scotch. Anyway, he pulled out his scotch, and David admits that he himself did not vote for Father Clark. And he says, do you really think that he would be happy here? And Father Jack says, why should he be happy? How happy are you? And David says the one thing that helps him to deal with it is having a place that hasn't changed. So the one thing that helps him deal with all this stuff. Yeah.
See
But
that.
that's also restricting
growth
and so many things that need to happen. It's just he needs to get past that. I understand that sentiment, but he's not applying it in the right scenario here.
Agreed.
And he says that there's a reason that they call it a sanctuary. Then he gets up and doubles down and he says, you know, my responsibility is to the congregation and not to you, not to Father Jack. And then he says, well, I've got a business to run, and walks out. And Father Jack's just sitting there pissed off and chugging his scotch. And I was really disappointed in David here because remember we talked about how he was presented with this choice, good choice or bad choice. He went with the bad choice. Obviously, there are probably people out there who would argue with that if they're super conservative religious folk and
I don't
whatever.
think he had a really good reason. Well, but other than, never mind.
Wanting to do what others wanted him to do.
Yeah, I don't think he truly had a good reason. I don't understand what his real reasoning was. I know what he told Father Jack the reasoning was. Yeah. I just don't understand it.
He's saying he doesn't want to rock the boat, but what really is happening is he doesn't want other people to pin the boat rocking on him because he's the
gay.
Swing vote.
Yes.
But other people don't. I don't think that one guy who called and said, do you think Father Clark is gay? I don't think he knew David is gay.
No, but I think if he eventually comes out, that it could somehow also be pinned on him.
Yeah.
Like he's probably trying to win.
Interesting. That's a good point. He's thinking ahead.
Or that he just picked. So if in a year David comes out as gay and they have Father Clark in, they'll you just
accuse him of
who knows.
Yeah,
it's just interesting. That's all I put was an interesting conversation.
It was really interesting and sad.
Yes.
Really quick here, you did not already know about this, so I know I forgot about it. But
I remember
Rico,
but I didn't think it.
Very super quickly, we see Rico in the prep room and his phone rings and he answers it and he's like, hello, and then all of a sudden he gets super serious and he's like, oh, yes. Hello, Mr. Gilardi. What can I do for you? And then it cuts
and nothing
to
happened.
Scene. We find out in the next coming episode what's going on, but they're just sprinkling in little tidbits for us.
Okay, so a foreshadowing moment.
Yes. And remember, last episode or a couple episodes ago, Rico mentioned to Nate and David that Gilardi had approached him.
Yeah.
And so that was another little sprinkling. Then it's coming back to it here. And it starts to come into the picture more as we go on. But that's really all we see in this episode is that he gets a phone call from Mr. Gilardi and he answers it and he's interested in whatever Mr. Gilardi has to say.
And are they calling him at the Fisher home?
I don't know. I'd have to go back and look. I would imagine it would make more sense if he had some kind of cell phone or something, but maybe not. But then we see Nikolai arguing with a couple at his flower shop who are there buying flowers for their wedding. And he's, again, arguing with them. So Ruth butts in because she works there now. And she saves this situation. And she tells this bride, it's your day. You can do whatever you want. And Nikolai is watching her and kind of smiling and nodding in approval. And he's impressed with her and smiles at her because he's seeing how valuable she can be for his business because he's a grump and he doesn't have people skills. And he's very arrogant.
Yeah.
And I think Ruth says that to him at some point. So he's realizing how much he needs Ruth. And we haven't seen so much of her talent yet as a florist, but we do end up finding out she is a very talented florist. Then we have a scene here. This is kind of long-winded, but I'll try to go through it as concisely as possible. But we're at Victor's memorial service at the funeral home. And there's a bunch of other veterans there that are giving their stories about Victor. And David is there, but he's stressed because of this mess going on with Paul, the brother, and the different requests they're receiving. And Paul hasn't gotten there yet. Yeah, they need a signature. They don't know where Paul is. And then he ends up walking in the middle of this funeral service and sees it happening. And then Paul freaks out. But before he can freak out too much, one of the veterans there asks, are you Victor's brother? And he says yes. And the soldier who was speaking applauds him, and they all applaud him for being an advocate for Victor. So that kind of softens Paul, and he lets his guard down a little bit. And this veteran who is speaking gives Paul a photo of Victor playing baseball or something. And Paul softens some more and asks the man, "Are you sick?" And he says, "No, I don't know why I never got sick, but a lot of people that I know did." And
I thought this was going to go way differently.
how did you think it was going to go?
I thought Paul was going to freak the fuck out.
He almost did, but he saw.
Even then, when his friend walked up to give him the picture, and
You thought he was
salute
going to
him,
freak out.
Yes,
It was, they did a good job of
putting you on the edge of your seat a little bit.
The tension was there. But you can see that he does have a heart, and he is receptive to these quick springings of, no, we cared about him and we're actually his friends who also loved and cared about him. So this veteran says, "Thank you for letting Vic have his military burial, even though I know that you were against it." And I'm sure this means a lot to him. This is where Paul ends up freaking out, because he storms away and he goes up to David and Nate and he's like, "What the fuck is he talking about, the military burial?" And
That's when they have to break the news.
yes,
Probably
so
not the best place.
but it was, they had to say something. And Nate stands up to him and he says, "I just want your brother to have the funeral that he wanted for himself, because that's his right. And he wanted to believe he died for something. Do you really want to take that away from him?" And Paul ends up breaking down crying and he says, "He's the only family I had left, and he can't even tell me what he wants when he's dead. He knew I would have tried to talk him out of this, and he's right. I would have." And Nate comforts Paul and suggests that he sit with his friends. So that was a super sweet moment. And then Claire is supposed to be taking the SATs, but we see her just drawing a skull on her Scantron sheet. So clearly she's not taking that very seriously. And then Nikolai finds Ruth crying in the back of the flower shop. And she's saying, "It's the smell of the flowers." And Nikolai's like, "You'll get used to it." She's like, "I am used to it. Today I help people choose flowers for weddings, new babies. I can't remember being surrounded by so much happiness. I'm used to the smell of flowers being something completely different. I'm used to people crying and being shattered." And Nikolai says, "Don't worry, we get funerals too."
I love that line.
He's so not emotionally intelligent, just very sexually present. But Ruth is saying, "I'm so happy. I can't wait to come back tomorrow." And Nikolai's like, "Okay, but you're not going to be like this every day though, right?" And Ruth kind of laughs, and it was kind of a cute little moment. I mean,
It was really sweet. The sense of smell, too, is one of those things that brings back your memories so well.
yeah, that is so true. You want to know an interesting sense of smell thing that I have been noticing lately for myself? So now that I work from home, I'm like a year and a half in, a little bit more than that, to working from home. And I used to work in a school for the first 8 years of my professional career. So I wasn't at home, but I make my own coffee at home now in a coffee pot in my kitchen. And a lot of the times I will make it in the morning and forget to turn the pot off. So it stays on during the day. And then I get that smell of kind of burnt coffee throughout my house.
Does it remind you of the break room?
No. It reminds me of the break room at Hardee's.
No, the break room at your school.
Oh, no. It reminds me of being at my grandma's when I was growing up, because she always had coffee on, and my grandpa would sleep in until like 1 p.m. and get up and drink coffee. So she would leave the coffee on from like 7 a.m. for him to drink when he got out of bed, which was so also sweet to think about, because they did kind of have like one of those relationships like Hattie and Mr. Jones, that they were just constantly bitchy to each other, but she would still do things like leave the coffee on for him, and you know what I mean? And so I don't know, it's like that weird smell. I'll get a whiff of that burnt coffee smell in the afternoons when I'm working at home, and I'll be instantly catapulted back to my grandma's house when I was little, like when she would have the coffee on. So interesting, but that is so true. And there's so many examples, I'm sure, that we can all think of.
Yes.
Of olfactory
We all have
senses.
at least one.
Can you think of one?
Yeah, actually, currently, when I go to pump my breast milk and I like take my shirt off and like you get a whiff of it, it obviously reminds me of snuggling
Like
the
your
baby.
other babies
Yeah.
when they were younger.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just like a calming scent for me.
That's cute. So then we see Victor getting his military funeral service, and they present the flag to Paul, Victor's brother, and he accepts it, and he's just very straight faced and takes it and is fine with this service. But then right after, he turns and he hands the flag to Nate, and he's like, give it to one of his friends, and then he just walks out.
I appreciated that.
Yeah.
Paul knew that he didn't want it. He wasn't going to keep something that he knew somebody else might want.
Yeah. Yeah. He didn't want to be reminded of that part of him and his brother's relationship, but he still found it within himself to do what his brother wanted.
Yes.
Which was very humble, and
it had to have been hard too to have
Yeah.
so much hate for something and then just know what the right thing
he
to
was faced
do.
with a choice too, just like
Yes.
David and Nate were. And then we see Nate and David walking through the cemetery.
Oh, I loved this
which
scene.
that must have been after the
The
service.
burial. Did they
for
end up doing
Victor?
the burial?
I think they did. And so Nate and David are like walking through the cemetery, and Nate he's a little bit behind David, and he reaches and grabs his shoulder and turns David toward him and just gives him this big hug. And he says, I love you, David, and I always will. And David's kind of looking at him like, what the hell? And Nate says, I could get hit by a bus on the way to the desert tonight, which is so sad because he's so excited to go to the desert with Brenda. He says, I just wanted to make sure you knew that. And David pauses and he's like, I love you too. That was so cute. So, I mean, this was probably my favorite moment from this episode.
You could tell when Nate turned to David that the look on David's eyes said that he needed a hug. I don't know if he was crying or if he was teary-eyed or what.
Yeah.
But just the fact that Nate knew that proves to me his empathic abilities. I don't know. He needed that touch.
Mm-hmm. And he's showing he cares so much about his family, and he's slowly realizing how important they all are to him. And David then says to Nate, you did the right thing today, which was also so amazing.
Nate needed to hear that.
He did.
I don't think Nate actually did need to hear that.
I think
he
it
would
was
have been
good he did.
Yes.
But he said, well, he responded, he said, I know. It feels kind of good, doesn't it? So it was like, he maybe didn't need that validation, but it was good that he got it from David, and it's good for their relationship that they're kind of having this conversation. And then they continue walking to wherever they were going to. I guess they were probably walking away from Victor's service. And then Nate walks into Brenda's, and Billy is there, and he's having an episode, and he tells Nate that she can't go anymore to the desert with him, and she needs to help him pick prints for his show, and he has his photographs scattered all
we walk
over.
into like a chaotic scene of a fucking FBI search party.
And Billy's like wrapped in a blanket, like looking like Smeagol.
Yeah.
Like just a weirdo. And he said, she gives me her eyes sometimes, okay? Because sometimes I go blind. So he's just being crazy. And Nate's pissed, obviously. And Brenda looks at him like, I'm sorry, but I can't control this. And Billy is babbling on about his eyes and shit, wrapped up in his little blanket, being manic. And Brenda is actively talking him off a ledge. Every 2 seconds, she's saying something to calm him down, to talk him off of this ledge that he's literally teetering on. And she says that she's going to talk to Nate on the porch. And Billy says, okay, then he's going to go away. So she's treating him like a child because she has to. And he turns and he looks at Nate and he says, you can fuck her some other time.
That was so frustrating for me because it seemed like Billy knew that they weren't going to the cactus place. This was all planned out, and he got what he wanted.
He did, though, because he sent that gift basket, so we know he knew, which was so sad that Brenda put in the effort to try to preserve that for her and Nate, but Billy still slid in there. And when she pulls Nate aside on the porch, she explains to him that Billy's off his meds, and Nate says, come on. And she says, I'm sorry, I can't. I'm all that he has when he's like this. And Nate tells her that she's letting Billy manipulate her, and Brenda then accuses him of thinking that they fucked.
I thought that was so weird.
Yeah, that was kind of out of nowhere.
What is it? A Freudian slip?
Yeah. Or it's clearly something that she's self-conscious of, that people will think because of how he probably acts around every guy she's ever had in her life. Billy gives off this vibe that he's obsessed with Brenda.
Somebody
So,
has asked them that before.
yeah,
Asked her that.
yes, yep. And she's putting that on Nate, thinking that. And
You can clearly see too that Nate did not think that
yeah,
at the time. He
not
probably
yet.
does now.
Right. He says, "What the hell? Why would you say that?" And Brenda just says, "This is who I am and this is what you get." And Nate kind of turns around in frustration and Brenda mumbles under her breath, "Fuck you." And Nate comes back and Brenda says, "You have no idea how much I wanted to go with you." And Nate then, this was also so big of Nate to do, but he's like, "Is there anything that I can do to help?" And Brenda says, "Yeah, go to the desert, sit in the mud, and forget about everything, including us. Just go, God damn it." And Nate is super sad and leaves. And that was super heartbreaking because we know that Brenda doesn't actually want that, but she's reverting back to what is clearly a pattern for her.
I also think Billy intentionally went off his med to sabotage
Yeah,
this.
for sure. Yeah, that was.
It's very frustrating because you feel bad for every single one of them, including you do. I mean, I don't like Billy, but I still feel bad for him that he's stuck in this.
He didn't choose to be mentally ill.
No, and
It's super
which
hard
then is
and
like,
complex.
It is. It's so complex.
Because, yeah, it's like you have somebody with severe mental health issues.
And why his parents aren't helping
Therapists.
It's so frustrating. There's so many things.
Yeah. Yeah. And Brenda, loves her brother and doesn't want and knows that her parents are toxic. So she doesn't want to shove him off to them because she knows that she's going to be better for him than they would be. But she's also sacrificing so much for that. So that's pretty much the end of the episode. We see Nate walking away and Brenda kind of broke up with him essentially.
It sounds like it.
We don't know if that's going to stick, but it didn't end well for them there. So super sad, but really interesting episode. There were some highs, some lows, pretty standard. Mate, date, cremate.
Mate, date, cremate. So we have to do
Father Clark.
Paul. Paul is the brother. Okay.
I don't know.
Okay, Paul it is. Mate, date, cremate. Paul, Father Clark, and let's do the teacher.
Okay, the crazy math teacher.
The wig,
yeah. So Paul, Father Clark, and
the teacher.
The math teacher.
So mate, date, cremate.
I would mate Paul because I don't want to marry him and I also don't want to mate the teacher. And then I would date Father Clark because he's progressive and apparently straight. And then I would cremate the teacher because she sucked and she was annoying and weird.
100% would do the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And who knows if we're mate date, and who knows if we picked the right date? Like, what if he turns out to be some like sociopathic psycho?
The Father Clark.
Yeah.
We don't know. I don't think we ever find out more about him because they voted against him.
Yeah.
So.
Poor guy. He's off the boat.
Yeah.
VIP for this episode, I think it would be Hiram.
Okay. We named him VIP before too.
Ooh, we should have a scoreboard.
We should start keeping track for sure. Why do you think it should be Hiram?
I just love how accepting I think it was that conversation.
I mean, I love him. I do.
I think it was that conversation about that Ruth. And how many lines did he have? 2?
All I needed to see was, oh, Ruth.
Sometimes actions speak louder than words.
So cute. Gosh, I don't know. I mean, I'm not against Hiram at all. I'm just trying to think, who would I choose if I had to pick anybody out of this episode to be MVP? It might be
or Nate.
You know what? I think I would maybe say Nate because he is the one who, out of the Nate and David, who were both faced with these big choices in this episode, he's the one who made the right choice. And he's been really doing a good job at kind of, well, I mean, at the beginning, he was still kind of like wishy-washy or like back and forth and compulsive. But I think we saw a lot of growth from him in this episode.
Agreed.
And we saw him make the right choice, which we weren't sure if he was going to do that.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but I do also that scene with Hiram. But then Nate, okay, I'm giving it
And
to
the
Nate
hug
when he
with-
hugged David.
Yeah.
Yeah, that earns him the MVP.
Okay. I will agree with that. I don't hate either of the options. And I'm sure Hiram will have another chance to be MVP.
Yeah. And he's already won it. But let us
And
know.
we know Nate probably won't have many more chances.
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to say thin ice, but that doesn't really
He's
make
not
sense.
quite on the ice yet.
He gets to be on.
Yeah.
Let us know who you would choose for MVP for this episode in the
Please.
comments. We would love to know. That's why we're doing.
And please like and subscribe and follow and share all of
Even
our
if you
stuff.
don't want, yes, please do all those things. But even just leaving a comment for us so we can see your thoughts on the episode, we would love. I don't think we've really gotten any comments specifically about specific parts of the episode that we've talked about. And that's what I would really love.
to go back and forth on.
Yeah, is to just
And when we
engage in
see-
conversation about the show. Truly. If you comment to us, I promise you, we will respond probably immediately.
We were just talking earlier too about, oh my God, we have 10 subscribers for blah, blah, blah. We're trying to figure out which area of the US that they're from. So we definitely look at this stuff.
We care and we just want to
Connect.
engage and talk to people. So thank you for listening. We love you so much.
We'll see
and
you next week.
I'll do my best
We'll see you next Tuesday.
to edit out the cries.
Love you
Bye.
too. Bye.